Romelu Lukaku. To put it mildly, he's a controversial footballer. You either love him or hate him. In fact, his last 4 clubs' fan bases totally despise him. And for fair enough reasons too. He's kissed a lot of badges in the past and subsequently betrayed a lot of people. To make things worse, he suffered significant individual misfortune at key moments in his career. The World Cup in 2022 against Croatia was a complete disaster class. The recent Champions League final, I'm sure you've all seen the footage. There was also the Europa League final own goal and the Super Cup final's decisive penalty miss. A lot of moments on the pitch he'd want to forget. Yet the mayhem surrounding this man extends well beyond the pitch, which I'll touch on later. But even with all the relentless criticism and hatred he has endured over the years, Lukaku has still had a commendable career. 365 goals scored by the age of 30. He's Belgium's all-time leading goal scorer. He's won trophies at Anderlecht, Chelsea, Inter Milan, and now at his latest club, Roma, the mercurial forward has found form once again with 9 goals in his first 12 starts for the Giallarosi. It's been a complicated 14-year career full of goals, high-profile blunders, ludicrous transfer fees, and continuous self-sabotage. This is the story of Romelu Lukaku. Despite the egotistical portrayal of the Belgian's persona, his childhood tells a completely different story. Born in the city of Antwerp on May the 13th, 1993, Lukaku's family was deeply involved in football. His father, Roger Lukaku, was a professional footballer himself, who spent the majority of his career in Belgium and even appeared for the national team of Zaire, which is now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. But shortly after retirement, Roger and his wife fell into poverty. Their son Romelu was well aware of his family's struggles from a very young age. Thankfully, he was an immensely gifted footballer. He first came to prominence at Liège SK, scoring 131 goals in just 68 matches. He was then snapped up by Anderlecht at 13 and continued to tear up as a youth player. Now, Lukaku physically developed far quicker than everyone else at his age. It was comical, really, and completely unfair. I mean, look at the size of him compared to his opponents. So he rapidly progressed through the youth teams at Anderlecht, and at just 16 years, 11 days, he had already made his first team debut. 9 months later, a senior cap for the Belgian Red Devils. That same season, he had become a first-team regular at Anderlecht, scoring 15 league goals, becoming the division's top scorer at just 17, and lifting his first senior title as champions of Belgium. The following campaign, he scored another 16 league goals. Lukaku was now one of world football's most exciting talents, alerting the interest of none other than Chelsea. For Lukaku, this was his destiny. From a young age, he wanted nothing more than a move to Stamford Bridge. He even visited the stadium on a school field trip in his teenage years and boldly stated, "I'm going to play here someday, I'm sure." Well, Lukaku well and truly manifested that reality, signing for the Blues for approximately £10 million in the summer of 2011. The Belgian had achieved his childhood dream, but now he had to prove himself in a fiercely competitive Chelsea side. The likes of Didier Drogba, Fernando Torres, Daniel Sturridge, Nicolas Anelka, and Salomon Kalou. So much quality in the final third. Breaking into that team was a sizable task. In the reserves, he was banging in the goals for fun, but at first team level, it wasn't as easy. 12 appearances in total, almost all off the bench, with 0 goals to show for it. It became clear that Lukaku wasn't quite ready for the very top yet. So at 19, he joined fellow Premier League side West Brom on a season-long loan, with the primary aim of securing regular first-team football. Lukaku made an immediate impact at West Brom. He showcased his physicality, speed, and goal-scoring ability, becoming a key figure in the team's attack. That season, he finished as West Brom's top scorer with 17 goals in the Premier League, including a memorable hat-trick on the final day of the season against Man United in Sir Alex Ferguson's farewell game in Football Management. Lukaku guided West Brom to a respectable 8th place finish in the Premier League, their highest finish in the competition at the time. The Belgian returned to Chelsea ready to lead the line. After all, he'd scored more goals last season than any other member of the Chelsea squad, so he was full of optimism. Shortly after, Jose Mourinho was appointed for the second time in his career as Chelsea's new manager. But in pre-season, it became clear that the special one favoured the likes of Fernando Torres and Samuel Eto'o over the youngster. Lukaku would get his chance to feature on the biggest stage though, in the Super Cup against Bayern Munich. The match would go to penalties, where unfortunately Lukaku's decisive spot kick was saved. After this, the Belgian's confidence in a Chelsea shirt simply diminished, and so on deadline day, he secured another loan, this time to Everton. The Belgian once again scored on his debut and quickly became a key player for the Toffees. Under Roberto Martinez, Lukaku was developing into one of the league's finest attacking players. That season, he scored 15 goals, assisting a further 8 in just 31 Premier League appearances. He was the standout player in a phenomenal season for Everton, finishing 5th and accumulating a club record 72 points. This was another immensely productive loan spell. Surely he had now proven his quality to Jose Mourinho, right? Well, there was just one tiny problem for the 21-year-old starlet. You see, Chelsea had just announced the signing of elite striker Diego Costa for £32 million. To make things even more difficult, Chelsea also brought in Loic Remy for 10.5 mil, and none other than the king himself, Didier Drogba, returning to the club on a free transfer. Lukaku simply couldn't get a break. He'd been a Chelsea player for 3 years now, but only made 15 appearances for the club. It just wasn't meant to be. Everton, meanwhile, were absolutely determined to land the youngster and ended up forking out £28 million, to which the Belgian agreed, signing a 5-year contract. Lukaku was delighted, kissing the badge upon his home welcoming. Spoiler alert, this man absolutely loves to kiss the badge. In his first season as a permanent Everton player, it was a mixed campaign. The Toffees performed considerably worse in the league this time round, finishing in 11th place, with Lukaku only scoring 10 league goals. But in the Europa League, however, Lukaku was prolific, scoring 8 goals in 9 games, finishing as equal top scorer of the tournament. Whilst Everton didn't win the Europa League, Lukaku's performances emphasised his quality on the European stage. Over the next 2 years of his Everton career, he performed outstandingly, scoring 51 goals and assisting 14 during this period. But Lukaku was now itching for a way out. He'd publicly questioned the club's ambitions and rejected a contract extension when offered. A big transfer seemed inevitable, and it was ironically Jose Mourinho's Manchester United who splashed the cash, signing him for £75 million. It was a fascinating move. After all these years of being viewed as an afterthought to Mourinho, the special one now wanted him the most. All eyes were now on Lukaku, and he would hit the ground running at United. He scored on his debut in the Super Cup. He scored a double on his Premier League debut, and he also scored on his Champions League debut as well. In fact, he bagged 11 goals in his first 10 appearances for the club. One of those games happened to be against Everton, where he proceeded to antagonise his former club's fans after scoring. The first of many bridges he would burn. But shortly after, his goal-scoring numbers steadily dropped off, and it wasn't long before the criticism started to mount. At a club like Manchester United, it's a very difficult place to succeed, period. Outside of the Fergie era, few have truly excelled in this environment, and Lukaku quickly became an easy target of abuse. Under the immense spotlight of Old Trafford, compilation of Lukaku's technical faults started to emerge. Even if he was scoring, a poor touch or a missed opportunity would garner far more attention. The fans were already starting to lose faith, but it was about to get much worse. Following the 2018 World Cup, a tournament that Lukaku performed very well in, earning the bronze boot with 4 goals, he then returned to pre-season training at Manchester in contentious circumstances. Why? Because he was overweight. It wasn't due to Lukaku being lazy necessarily. No, for the national team, Lukaku was required to put on considerable muscle to fit the tactical demands of his team. However, at United, he needed to be far more mobile and was required to shed the weight, something which didn't come about easy. This frustrated fans and even former players, including Gary Neville, who openly criticised Lukaku for his weight struggles. That following season, not only had Lukaku's performances dropped off, but the team was also struggling. So much so that Mourinho was eventually sacked, with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer replacing him as caretaker manager. And the Norwegian clearly preferred a more agile striker, with Marcus Rashford being deployed as the 9 more often than not. United fans had practically given up on the forward at this point. I mean, the numbers didn't lie. Under both Mourinho and Solskjaer's management, United averaged more points when Lukaku wasn't in the starting 11. The Belgian was well aware that he was no longer wanted at Old Trafford, so a change of scenery was desperately required. Thankfully, Antonio Conte's Inter Milan were keen on Lukaku and ended up breaking their own transfer record on deadline day, securing his signature for €80 million. The striker was hoping to reinvent himself in an environment where the spotlight was slightly diminished. Inter was still a huge club, absolutely, but at Manchester, the relentless criticism was uniquely toxic. So from day one in Italy, Lukaku appeared to be a far happier person. This translated directly onto the pitch, and like he did at West Brom, Everton and Manchester previously, Lukaku scored on his debut for Inter at the San Siro, swiftly endearing himself to the Nerazzurri faithful. The powerful forward relished playing in Conte's tactically astute Inter Milan side and developed a formidable partnership with Lautaro Martinez. Individually, Lukaku was superb with 20 23 Serie A goals, he'd raised Inter's attacking prowess to finish in second place, only 1 point shy of CR7's Juventus. But the season wasn't over yet. There was still one game left to play, the Europa League final. Despite an early exit in the Champions League, Lukaku spearheaded their Europa League run-in, scoring 6 goals in 5 games, resulting in a fascinating final against the competition specialist Sevilla. Lukaku had a dream start to this match, slotting home a penalty early on to give Inter the lead. But he wouldn't be remembered for that goal, because the game would eventually be tied at 2-2, and late in the second half, Sevilla had a corner, and Diego Carlos's bicycle kick inadvertently struck Lukaku and ended up in his own net. An own goal to win Sevilla the Europa League final. His dream had quickly turned into a living nightmare, a sour end to an otherwise impressive season. But credit to Lukaku, the man bounced back quick. Conte's Inter were a different beast in his second season in charge, with his Belgian forward now at the peak of his powers. That season he was unstoppable, with 24 goals, 10 assists, to hand into their first Scudetto since 2010, ending Juve's 9-year Serie A dominance, and despite Ronaldo outscoring the Belgian, Lukaku was still awarded Serie A MVP for his incredible season. At 28, he had become the complete centre forward. It wasn't just the end product. His technique had improved significantly, his hold-up play was world-class, and his athleticism was frightening. As a result, his former club Chelsea had taken note. After the Blues failed to land Erling Haaland, Lukaku became their sole target. Once Lukaku found this out, his mind was already made. After all, he still had a point to prove, that he could conquer the English game. A deal was made, and for a club record fee of £97.5 million, Lukaku was once again a Chelsea player. Inter fans were furious, because months prior to this, Lukaku replied to a tweet asking, "When are you coming home?" saying, quote, "I am home right now." It caused a lot of controversy, but that was somehow just the beginning of the cyclical drama. Lukaku's second coming at Chelsea got off to the perfect start, opening his account for the club inside 15 minutes against Arsenal at the Emirates. He celebrated the moment by kissing the Chelsea badge, the club he had supposedly loved since childhood. 4 goals in his opening 4 games for Chelsea, the Blues finally had a striker who could take them to Premier League glory. Oh, how wrong that turned out to be. Over the next few months, the goals started to fizzle out, and he suffered a minor injury in the process. But what happened next was unfathomable. Out of nowhere, Lukaku scheduled an unauthorized interview with Sky Italia, and it was completely off the rails. He first criticized Tuchel's tactics and decisions, claiming he was unhappy with the situation. He mentioned that had Inter previously extended his contract, quote, "We would not be doing this now here from London, but quietly from Milan." And when the interviewer asked if he'd want his former teammate Martinez to join him at Chelsea, he said, "No, Lautaro, you can stay in Milan. I'll be back there." Yikes. And those are just a few quotes, as wild as it gets. Chelsea spent close to £100 million just a few months prior on this guy. What was he thinking? Lukaku would inevitably be suspended for the bombshell interview. An apology interview was then made by Chelsea to try and salvage the situation, but realistically, the damage was done. Now, he was integrated back into the team and actually played a pivotal role in Chelsea's only trophy that season, the FIFA Club World Cup. However, Chelsea and their fans simply wanted Lukaku gone. But how do you simply get rid of a £325,000 a week player with 4 years remaining on his contract? It was a total mess. Luckily for Lukaku's sake, Inter were willing to take him back despite his controversial past with the club, paying a £7 million loan fee to do so. Lukaku had made some huge mistakes in the past, so it was time to let his football do the talking. One thing that no one could criticize Lukaku for was his ability to shine on debut. After scoring against Lecce on the opening day of the Serie A season, it looked like his darkest days were finally behind him. But shortly after, Lukaku picked up a muscular injury that ruled him out till late October. He'd recover only to pick up another injury shortly after, this time a thigh strain. The timing of this setback couldn't have been any worse, as the World Cup was just around the corner. Lukaku was still of the utmost importance to the Belgian Red Devils as the nation's all-time leading goal scorer. The team was entirely structured to play to his direct strengths. He was included in the final squad, but it was clear that Lukaku was not match fit. In open training sessions, he could barely run. He missed the opening game against Canada and managed only 9 minutes off the bench in a defeat against Morocco. In the final match of the group against Croatia, he came on at halftime with the scores level at 0-0. Due to results elsewhere, Belgium needed to beat Croatia to advance. But what happened next was one of the craziest events in World Cup history, because Lukaku proceeded to miss not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 clear-cut chances, each miss seemingly more horrendous than the last. Belgium drew that game 0-0, resulting in their exit from the tournament, and the internet collectively lost its mind. Lukaku was the laughingstock of world football. He had been criticized in the past, but this was on another level. Billions of people ridiculing this man. Absolutely brutal stuff. The return of club football couldn't have come soon enough for the Belgian. Back at Inter, and the spotlight had once again lessened to Lukaku's delight. Behind the scenes, he was working overtime to regain full fitness. He witnessed Inter lift the Supercoppa Italiana from the bench, but started to find his feet towards the back end of the season. He had 11 goal contributions in his final 7 league games, won the Italian Cup final, and helped take Inter to the biggest European prize on offer, the UEFA Champions League final. This was a chance to put a year of misery behind him, to achieve history with Inter Milan and become European champions. But there was one man who stood in his way. No, I'm not talking about Erling Haaland, but none other than Romelu Lukaku, because the Belgian produced another howler that day. Firstly, he inadvertently blocked his own teammate's attempt on goal, and in the dying embers of the match, a free header from 6 yards out, a shocking miss. City prevailed 1-0 that day, and Lukaku was once again the punching bag of world football. This disastrous performance closed off a miserable chapter in Lukaku's career, one that he won't soon forget. In many ways, I felt sorry for the big man. The social media backlash was just insane. He'd become such an easy target for abuse online. But his next move was absolutely shameful. His loan spell at Inter had come to an end, and despite all the controversy surrounding his time at the Nerazzurri, the club remained loyal to Lukaku and were negotiating a permanent deal with Chelsea. But behind the club's back, Lukaku and his agent were secretly negotiating a deal with fierce domestic rivals Juventus. Once Inter found out about this, they were mortified and cut off all ties to the player. The Ultras accused Lukaku of betrayal, and ironically, Juventus couldn't even afford to sign Lukaku in the end. So all that backstabbing was for nothing. The only club that had a serious bid on the table was Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal. However, Lukaku was unwilling to move to the Middle East. He was now in no man's land, hated by Chelsea and hated by Inter Milan. Total self-sabotage. But fortunately, there was one manager who was willing to give Lukaku another chance. None other than Jose Mourinho at Italian club Roma. Tammy Abraham had suffered an ACL injury in the final game of the previous season, so the Giallarosi needed a powerful forward to replace him. For a loan fee in the region of 7 to 8 million pounds, Lukaku signed for Roma on a 1-year deal. He shockingly didn't find the back of the net on his Roma debut, but has since settled into the capital of Italy with 9 goals in just 12 starts as of recording this video. Despite the challenging circumstances the pair had working together at both Chelsea and Manchester United in the past, the respect has always remained. Whilst Roma haven't made the best of starts domestically speaking, Lukaku hasn't put a foot wrong and is starting to form a unique partnership with Paulo Dybala. If these two can remain fully fit, then Mourinho may be able to get this team truly firing. It's the latest chapter in Lukaku's hit and miss career. He's had great moments in the past, but those have all too often been overshadowed by viral blunders and some questionable off-field antics. People do forget just how good of a footballer this man is on his day. He's one of the best goal scorers of this generation, and at just 30 years of age, you'd assume he's still got plenty of gas left in the tank. I personally think Roma is a match made in heaven for Lukaku. The Giallarosi have accepted him despite his very public flaws, and the result so far has been promising. He could elevate this club to new heights. They simultaneously cannot let their guard down, because Lukaku can be a menacing individual under certain circumstances. But with all that being said, what are your thoughts on Lukaku's crazy career? Please do let me know in the comments below, because I'm curious as to how you guys perceive him as a player, and more importantly, as a person. Nonetheless, hope you enjoyed this video. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you next week.